Well, I found my mic. There is no way this still works. Still works. There's some hair on it. Welcome back to another episode of An Actor's Journey, where we are currently walking through The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. We have officially made it further in the book this time than I did the first time that I tried to do this. I am not a dancer. It's part of why I decided film instead of musical theater. I love to sing, I love to act. I enjoy dancing. I am not good at it. My very first dance instructor told me that I dance like a gorilla with two left feet. Not just a gorilla, not just a person with two left feet, but a gorilla with two left feet. Week 3 seems like a small accomplishment, but as Julia Cameron talks about in the book, it's progress, not perfection, and that's what we're going to focus on. Before I jump into the chapter, things have been really good lately. I actually just booked 2 of the biggest gigs in my career that I've booked so far. Can't tell you what they were because I signed NDAs, but one of the gigs I booked was background for a pretty well-known TV show. While I didn't get to do a whole lot, it was still really cool to be in an environment of such high production and quality and professionalism. And I got to see and experience a lot of things that I haven't gotten to see and experience on independent sets. The other gig I booked was actually filmed at Trilith Studios, which was such a surreal experience, getting to pull up to the security guard, flash a badge, say I'm here for filming, and him wave me through and say report to Studio 22. And it was really, really cool. I can't, again, say a whole lot about it. It was just background work. Don't get ahead of yourself and think I'm the next DC superhero or anything. Not yet. But it was still a really cool experience, and those 2 things within the same month really gave me a new excitement and a new energy moving forward into the new year. But jumping into the chapter, week 3 was titled Recovering a Sense of Power, and while I did think it was a really good chapter, I struggled a bit finding the through line or the overarching theme that she was trying to convey. While my videos are usually just me free flow speaking and I have like 3 hours of footage to comb through in order to make sense of it all, I decided to write myself a script, which I have not done since my very first video, so that I could really gather my thoughts and help myself understand what I read this week. She starts the chapter by talking about synchronicity, and boiled down, that is the power of letting go and allowing things to work out on their own. Then she moves on to shame, and that's something that can easily hold us back from our power. Criticism is to be handled with care because it can lead to shame, which stunts power, or it can lead to growth, which is a result of tapping into your power. And anger is a roadmap to discovering where your power lies. That last part sounds a little Sithy.
I can feel your anger. Makes you stronger.
I thumbed through the chapter again, hoping that she had defined power somewhere and I just missed it, but she didn't. That may be why the chapter felt a little disjointed to me. But given context clues, it seems that her definition of power is likely one of 2 things. Either the power of a great creator above or in the universe, however you want to think of it, that drives your creativity, or the power you have within you as a creative person to be impactful on the world around you. As creative people, a lot of us recognize that power and do our best to control and manipulate it to fit the narratives of our lives. While that isn't always inherently bad, Julia Cameron teaches that there can be power in taking your hands off the wheel, trusting your creativity, and seeing where the synchronicities of life take you. I heard that concept a lot growing up, especially as a Christian. You hear, Jesus take the wheel, or let go and let God. And I guess I never fully related to that sentiment because that sentiment is very scary. It's very scary to imagine that you are not in control of your own life. I wrote down something in this chapter that really stood out to me. It says, possibility is far more frightening than impossibility. Possibility is defined. Impossibility is limitless. When you begin living in the world of impossibility, you begin leaving things up to chance or synchronicity. Synchronicity can be viewed as coincidence or the movement of God in your life. I prefer to believe in the latter. Julia Cameron writes, it is much easier to chalk things up to coincidence than to give credit to a God who wants something from you. The Bible says to ask and you will receive. Now, there's greater context to that verse. It's talking about asking for things within the will of God. But Julia Cameron touches on this a little bit, and she says answered prayers are scary. They imply responsibility, which I absolutely love, because answered prayers deliver the issue that you've brought to God back into your own hands. You asked for it, you got it. Now, what are you going to do with it? If you ask God for something that you believe is in His will, get ready to move. He hears you. Ask, take a step of faith, and then watch what happens. It goes back to that other quote that I wrote down from a couple chapters ago, where it says, leap and the net will appear. It's the Indiana Jones moment. I want to enter the clip again, but I've already done that in another video. Sometimes that dream feels like a chasm, and there is no other way across than to just step and see what happens. Leave it up to synchronicity. Leave it up to the hand of God in your life. Julia Cameron writes, the first step of synchronicity is choosing your what. Choose your what before focusing on your how. Don't get too lost in strategy. Chase your what and let synchronicity do the rest. I saw a video of Russell Crowe recently in an interview where he was asked about his techniques and his acting methods that he applies when he's in front of the camera. He responded by saying he doesn't even know what the Stanislavski method is, and he doesn't care to. He's never been to a proper drama school or an acting conservatory. He just gets in front of the camera and does the Russell Crowe method, as he put it. He said it's just life experience, living in the moment, playing pretend, and it works for him. That's like the definition of not getting lost in technique, chasing the what and not the how. If you believe you're truly gifted in an area or a skill, sometimes all it takes is just doing it. There is power in action. She includes a quote from scholar, statesman, and artist Goethe in this chapter that says, whatever you think you can do or believe you can do, begin it. Action has magic, grace, and power in it. Once you begin to step out in action, you're bound to take a few risks. Risks can sometimes result in anger. Julia Cameron writes that as a creative, anger is meant to be listened to. Anger is a map. It shows us where our boundaries are. It lets us see where we've been and lets us know that we haven't liked it. Anger is meant to be acted on, not acted out. Anger is not the action itself, but it is action's invitation. Anger points the direction. Anger is the fuel to move. Anger tells us that what we were doing isn't working anymore. It's time to try something new. Trying something new could imply a new approach or avoiding bad habits that weren't working. Anger will always tell us when we have betrayed ourselves. It will always tell us that it is time to act in our own best interests. I think overall, this advice should be taken with a grain of salt. I think that there are both benefits and dangers in approaching anger this way. One of the benefits, for instance, would be an experience I had in acting class this last week. We were paired up with other actors in class and given the assignment to write a short scene and then perform it the following week in class. The guy that I was paired up with was initially very excited to work with me, and I was excited to work with him. We developed a concept for the scene, a good flow, start to finish, some drama, some highs and lows, and then we separated to work on the scene individually and would come back together and combine our ideas and have a finished script. He wrote a general outline for the scene, whereas I took a lot of time and carefully crafted the dialogue and set up some reveals and really put a lot of time and effort into the script. When we got back together to compare and contrast and come up with a finished product, he took my work and threw it out the window. Furthermore, when we got into class, he threw me under the bus in front of everyone and tried to say that I didn't do any work. This, of course, resulted in a lot of anger from me. And rather than acting out and retaliating and defending myself, which I don't think would have done a lot, I'm new to this class. He's been there a long time. I'm sure they know him better than they know me. I used the anger to teach myself to be a bit more on guard when working with someone new. I started looking back at some of the red flags that he had presented from the very beginning and said, great, let's take note of this, keep it in the back of your head, and keep it in mind for the next time that you work with someone new. Know that A, B, and C you didn't like, but you chose to sweep under the rug. Say it's fine, it'll work out later. And then it didn't. So now, next time you're working with someone new and you notice A, B, and C again, know that those are warning signs that maybe this is not an environment or a type of person that you will work well with. I've learned something about myself as a creative person through my anger. An instance where approaching anger this way would be dangerous rather than beneficial would be in the world of criticism. If someone decides to offer criticism towards your creativity, be it beneficial or otherwise, and your response is not to listen but to get angry, that can be not only damaging to you as a creative, but you as a person. Because the next time you receive criticism, your brain, your spirit, your body will say, oh, I learned how to deflect this by getting angry because I don't like the way it feels. And you will start to use that as a coping mechanism. You'll hear criticism, and your response, your immediate response, will be anger. And that's not beneficial for anyone. One of the very first scripts I had written was a script about young Elvis trying to decide if he would follow his roots in gospel music or follow the new path of rock and roll. When I presented the script to a trusted teacher of mine, she completely disregarded it and said that she found it almost unreadable because all of my dialogue was presentational. I was telling the audience how the characters felt rather than letting the characters be people and actually feel these emotions. I was angry at this criticism, but I didn't act out on it. And I didn't use it as a way to separate myself from writing or separate myself from receiving criticism on my writing. I didn't get angry and I didn't say, you don't know what you're talking about. I think this is a good script. I'm right and you're wrong. I took her notes and I said, maybe there's something to be gained here. Maybe there's something I need to go back and look at again in order to further craft my skill as a writer. Dealing with criticism was actually another short section of this chapter where she says, art matures spasmodically and requires ugly duckling growth stages. Defend your work to yourself, but also be aware and open to criticism. And once you receive that criticism, she says, creativity is the only cure for criticism. When I received that criticism on my script, I could have chosen just to stop writing altogether. But that was my sophomore or junior year of high school. And I've written many scripts since then, but I never forgot that criticism. I learned from it. I keep it in the back of my head. Almost every time I write a line of dialogue, I hear my teacher's voice saying, is this presentational or are they actually feeling this emotion? It's something that I learned from. It's something that I kept with me. And it's something that I use to mold my creativity going forward. You have to continue being creative when you receive criticism. Criticism is just a stepping stone of creativity to getting your art to a place that you can be comfortable and proud of it. She compares criticism to a wound in creativity. She says, before a wound can heal, it must be seen. This act of exposing the wound or receiving criticism is often reacted to with shaming, and shame was another short section of this chapter. She says that shame is re-triggered in us as adults because our internal artist is always our creative child. Remember that you have to protect your inner artist, and this is something that I have to remind myself with the utmost care and caution, because your inner artist is like a child. You're constantly nurturing and guiding it toward growth. I tend to be my own worst critic. I will be overly critical of every bit of work that I do. But I also think it's incredibly important to recognize when your work is good. And she talks about that here too. She says the antidote for shame is self love and self praise. When I audition, and I've had a lot of auditions this month, I'm averaging about 4 auditions a week, which is so amazing, so much more than what I had in Texas. It's easy for me to be overly critical of my own work. But I filmed an audition last night, and I think it only took me like 3 takes. I watched on the third one and I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's good. I I really genuinely think that's good. And I wasn't being blind to the criticism that I could have offered myself. I was just recognizing that for the work I did, for the time that I had to do that work, that was good work. And there were other things I needed to move on to. So, again, like I've mentioned before, learn to appreciate each step. You can't be so focused on each individual step of progress because you'll stop moving. Find a place that works for you, find a place where you are satisfied, and then move on, because that's how you continue to grow. Receive the criticism, build, learn from it, and then keep moving, keep being creative. She says that shameful criticism may block an artist. Constructive criticism leads to growth. We must learn when and where to seek out criticism. Be extra, extra careful with that inner artist. Make sure that the criticism you're receiving is not only beneficial, but that it's not harming you, that it's not blocking you as an artist. Also, be aware of who you should receive criticism from. Some people's opinions are not going to be beneficial to your overall growth. If you're an actor and you have a friend who doesn't watch movies, don't show them your audition tape for feedback. If you're a writer and you have a friend who doesn't read books, don't offer them the first draft of your chapter to read and give feedback on. If in general in life, if you have a friend who you know is always overly critical, no matter what the situation is, maybe stay away from them when you're feeling down and criticizing yourself. Learn to find the people who constantly uplift you. That was actually one of the assignments in the side activities this week, was to identify people in your life who I call your cheerleaders, your people who you know are always going to be in your corner. There were 2 people in my morning pages that immediately stood out to me as this kind of supporter. I won't say their names, but I will tell you what I wrote about them. This first person is my realist. I said they've known me the longest of anyone in my friend group, which also means they know me the best. They're who I go to for hard life advice, guidance, and reality checks. They can be very encouraging, and they're always supportive, but above all, they are wise, understanding, subjective, and comforting. They've been my life guide more times than they probably know, and I'm so grateful for that. The second person who's been in my life a significantly less amount of time, but has made just as much of an impact, I said, is my 24/7 cheerleader. When I need someone who will believe in me no matter what, they're my guy. Always positive, always encouraging, and always on my side. Sometimes I have all the answers and I don't need someone like the first person. Sometimes what I need is someone to tell me that I can do it, feed into the possibilities of what could happen next, and be excited with me. That's where this second person shines the most, and it's felt so good to have someone like that in my life. The assignment was to find people who are positives. I'm sure if the assignment had been to find people who criticize you and help you build as an artist, I could have done that too. But there was another thing that she said in a chapter that I wrote down, and that's that criticism will come from everywhere. Encouragement and nurturing is much more rare. When you step out into a world of creativity, there's always going to be people criticizing you and offering feedback. Whether it's other people in your industry, people outside of the industry, like I said before, people that don't know anything about the industry, or genuinely people trying to hold you back, criticism is going to come from everywhere. Sometimes it comes from within too. You have to find those people in your life who are going to encourage you and keep you moving forward. I think that's just as valuable, if not more valuable, than receiving the criticism itself. That leads us into the last section of this chapter, which was titled Growth. She says that growth is an erratic forward movement. Growth occurs in spurts. You will lie dormant sometimes, but don't be discouraged. Think of it as resting. I've had plenty of seasons in my life where I am on the go 24/7. I remember a particular week in Texas where the auditions were flowing, the gigs I was booking. I had like 5 gigs in one weekend. I barely slept. I was driving all over the Metroplex. I actually slept on set a couple of times just so I could keep going. Those times are awesome. I live for those times. But I also remember times in my career where I went months without a single audition, much less a booking. Those times can be very discouraging, but it doesn't mean that your career is over. Just because the momentum stopped doesn't mean it's the end. Take advantage of those times. Rest, recover. Remember to feed into your inner artist who is a child, who needs that nurturing, who needs that rest. Because when the busy season comes again, if you've stressed yourself out during the dormant time, when it starts booking again, when things start moving again, you're going to be too exhausted or too frustrated to enjoy the busy times. Rest, be ready, be prepared for things to get busy again. And when it happens, you'll be grateful for it. I wrote in my notes this week, don't be afraid to push yourself. Equally, don't be afraid to baby yourself. And growing up in a sports environment, that was something I never heard. It was always push, 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 do more, more, more. But babying yourself was a terrible concept. Don't baby yourself. But I think as an adult, as an artist, again, not only does criticism come from everywhere, but busyness, expectations come from everywhere. Sometimes if you're so focused on all of that, you will start to feel defeated. I think it's a really, really good habit to get into, to learn how to encourage yourself, how to nurture yourself, how to baby yourself. Because again, the criticism will come from everywhere. Sometimes encouragement can be hard to find or non existent altogether. Sometimes you're going to have to rely on yourself to encourage you. And you won't know how to do that unless you're constantly in tune and connecting with that inner child, that inner baby that needs to be taken care of. A lot of the side activities for this week were about connecting with that inner child, not just creatively, but personally. Write down your favorite childhood activities. Describe your childhood room. What was your dream as a child? What were your favorite childhood treats? So much of it was about bringing your mind, your mental state, back to what it felt like to be a child full of joy and wonder and passion without all that negativity and criticism that comes with life as an adult. I didn't understand it as I was reading it or as I was doing the activities, but now doing my recap, I think I understand that she's trying to break you out of the mold of what you feel like you have to be, what you feel like you have to do. And remember that at the core, behind all the have tos, you're a creative person and you enjoy life. Don't forget that you enjoy life and you find creativity everywhere. I think somewhere in this week, it started to shift my perspective without me even realizing it. In conversations at work, as I'm talking to other production members who are there filming for various different projects, I found myself really leaning in to the different sides of production, be it art department or sound or lighting or whoever I was talking to. I just found it so fascinating and I was filled with wonder and I was filled with excitement. And as I would go about my daily life, I spent more time in parks. I went on my artist date this week. And I realized that life is so much more freeing. It feels so much more powerful to just say yes to the creativity that's put in front of you rather than hand picking the creativity or gripping that steering wheel and steering it in the way that you think it should go. I wrote that my foot is on the pedal, but my hands are off the wheel. I'm going full speed ahead to whatever God puts in front of me. Whatever area is creative and fulfilling and makes me happy in life, I'm more than willing to pursue that. Do I still want to be an actor? Yes, of course, more than anything. But if God says, hey, there's someone at your bar that thinks you have a really creative eye and they want you to be a part of the art department. There was a guy earlier this week that said he was planning a big event next month and he would like for me to create the craft cocktail for the event. That's not acting. It is creativity. It is something that I enjoy, something that I find fulfillment in. Whatever God puts in front of me, I will go full speed ahead. I will say yes. Creativity in all sorts of forms is beginning to fuel me again. But my hands are off the wheel. I'm done trying to control. I'm done trying to guide that creativity. There's still a destination I would like to reach, but I think there's so much more freedom in just saying yes. And I think that's where I am in my journey right now. So, recovering a sense of power. There is power in creativity, there's power in synchronicity, there's power in criticism, and there's power in learning how to nurture yourself. My foot is on the pedal, and my hands are off the wheel.